This is my crumpled up GR Supra. And the last thing we need to do before we can reassemble it is weld our frame back on. The problem is, I may be in way over my head. If you are just joining us, I bought this crumpled up Supra at auction, sight unseen, for $5,500. Then we removed all of the crash damage, pulled the engine, gutted the interior, cut off the damaged frame, disassembled the entire rear of the car, and finally, last episode, we got the uniside off, leaving us with this empty shell of a Supra. Which brings us to this. You might see this and think, hell yeah, brother, that looks pretty good. Well, let me show you a little bit closer. This is a tram gauge and it's used to accurately measure between 2 points. For instance, between point J and point C, it should be 1,208 millimeters. And in this case, it is exactly 1,208. From points J to F, it should be 685 millimeters or 27 inches. And when I measure this, smack on 27 inches. And if we measure from J to the very tippity tip of the frame, it should be 1,283. And look at that, 1,283. So this side is exactly where it should be. Unfortunately, that's where the good news ends. Let's do the other side. The other side, if we do those same 3 measurements, starting with the long one, 1,283, we get 1,279. And if we go J to C, this one should be 1,208, and we get 1,204. And finally, the shortest measurement, the passenger side J to F should be 27 inches, and we get 26 3/4. So driver side, fantastic. Passenger side, no bueno. If we measure between the 2 frame pieces, C to C should be 1036, and we are at 1020. 16 millimeters too close together. Just for good measure, F to F should be 1092, and we are at 1078. So from that, we can see that this side measures fantastic, this side does not measure fantastic, and we can see that it's because this side is kinked in and these are too close together. We can verify that even more by just simply trying to fit our front crash bar and no go. So we know that the driver's side frame, spot on. Passenger side frame, not spot on, but it's because we're kinked in, and we know we're kinked in because of this existing chassis leg here needs to be pushed out 1/4 of an inch. The reason for my existential dread is not because that's 1/4 inch off, it's because the entire firewall is 1/4 inch pushed in. So here we are, firewall joining our new frame, and you can see there's a gap here and a gap here. This gap is only 0.2 inches and this gap is 0.3 inches. That gap is way better on the driver's side. You can see no gap here, but a little bit of a gap here. This one is also 0.2 inches. So I'm glad that we're finally on the same page of why I have no clue if I can repair this frame. I'm not a frame repair shop. I don't really have the tools to pull frame. If you're not new to the channel, you'll know that I already pulled some of this chassis straight using a 4-wheeler, a winch, a come along, and some wood, well, and a hammer. And that's how I'm gonna pull this firewall out too. So yeah, in the intro when I said I may be in over my head, I meant yes, I am 100% in over my head. I don't know if I can repair this, but I literally have no other option. I have to try.
So the first thing I'm going to tackle is this dent in the passenger side frame here. So we sand off the paint, weld on some flat bar so I have somewhere for my clamp to grab, set up my amazing pulling system, and start pulling. Then we relieve the tension by hammering on the corner here, and with that dent pulled out, I grind off my flat bar and weld and sand that section smooth. Now we can weld the flat bar farther out to give us more leverage on a stronger part of the frame. Clamp down on the flat bar, set up for the pull, and pull we did. Hammer on the inside corner to relieve as much stress as we can, and release the pull.
What do we got for a measurement? It did move it. Suppose we can throw the frame on and see if it looks any better. Okay, let's talk about me for a second. I'm sick of talking about the car. Talk about me, right? I would say I've been in what's called analysis paralysis, meaning I don't want to mess up the chassis, so I just keep on measuring and tweaking, trying to figure out what to do because I'm scared. I don't know. This is my first time doing this, so I need to learn. So I had my friend John come over. John used to work at an auto body repair shop fixing frames. He came over, talked to me for like an hour and a half about the car. And while he was talking to me, he started fixing this fender here. He just couldn't help himself. So while I'm talking, I'll put that up quick. You can watch him hammer it out. So anyway, John came over, talked to me about the car, told me that I'm on the right path and I need to stop overthinking it. Now, I agree with him on most of that statement. Obviously, it's way better to think, make sure you're on the right path before you do something silly. So I went over the measurements with John. He said, put the front crash bar on, put the front subframe on, and if it lines up, pull the firewall out, weld it on, and we can make more adjustments once the frame is welded to the car. He said it'll be easier to pull the car once it's welded on because I'll have more leverage, I have more spots to pull from. What I'm saying is this whole time, it's like pull that, measure, pull that, measure, pull that, measure, and I've been scared of this moment of where I have to pull the firewall because I don't want to mess it up. And of course, seeing the subframe on and the crash bar on, really reassuring. All the bolt holes are lining up, the bolts are in it, holding it on by itself. So it's time to bite the bullet. It's time to stop being so scared and just pull this freaking firewall.
So it's finally time to bite the bullet and try to pull this firewall. So we remove our crash bar, the subframe, and the actual frame pieces, grind off our flat bar so we can weld it onto the firewall, and now I have to move my lovely pulling device over from the side of the car to the front, which is super fun to do. And again, set up my wood bracing and ratchet it all together.
Oh, dude, see how awful this is? Like, oh man, I need a frame puller. All right, I'm setting you up over there so you can see if this moves at all. Oh, it's twisting it. I gotta straighten out the four-wheeler here so it's pulling straight out. It's just pulling the car off the stands rather than the firewall. I knew I was gonna have a hard time pulling this firewall out. I don't know if it moved. Okay, we're back the next day. I just wanna say, if you don't have frame repair tools, maybe don't try doing frame repair because this sucks. Not very fun. But yesterday our issue was I was pulling here and it was twisting it off, right? Because our pivot point's there and triangles and stuff. So I cut another piece of wood to brace that side. So now it can't pull it out. So if this doesn't work, which I think it will, because I'm gonna pull and then hit it with a hammer, the go-to method of straightening stuff out. But anyway, if this doesn't work, I'm gonna either have to pay someone to do it or spend like $2,000 on a frame straightener, a Chinese one. So let's try it again, but with an extra piece of wood. Hopefully you guys can see this pull out. I probably won't be able to. I don't know if it moved personally, but the camera does. So before I cut this flat bar off and test fit the frame, because that takes time, I'm just going to upload this footage to my laptop, watch it back and see if it moved. All right, just watch that footage back. I mean, if it did move it, I don't think it moved enough. So I'm gonna do one more pull. I'm gonna hit it with a bigger hammer. I'll try to get some more tension on it. I know I can get more tension. I'm also trying not to stand above a tension metal wire. That sounds dangerous. So one more pull, bigger hammer, and then I'm gonna have to cut this off, test fit it, and see if anything's even moving. You can see I got welding blankets over the wire here just in case it breaks. I don't know how much that's gonna help if this cable breaks, just a little bit safer. Before it was 0.3 inches and now we have 0.2. Guess it worked a little bit, but yeah, not enough. We're so close on the driver's side. I mean, we're like touching everywhere except for just right here. So as of now, everything still measures out exactly where it should be. Triangulation measurements from our firewall to our new frame. Everything's still in spec there. And we did make some progress on the firewall. It pulled out 0.1 inches of the 0.3 inches we needed. So a family friend actually gave me a stud welder slide hammer starter kit. Used, of course. I mean, look at this box. It's used, it's old, but I've already tested it to make sure it works. Let's see if we can use this to start pulling this out. I don't know how long I'm supposed to hold down the welder for. So this I like just blipped it and it broke off. So a little bit longer. So that was just instead of a quick blip, that was a bit of a zzz, you know, held on to it for a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it moved it a bit. Now, this is kind of stupid and just for funsies, but I'm gonna see what a self-tapper does. Yo! Guys, the self-tapper closed the gap. Can I just self-tap this shit together? It actually closed the gap over here too. Wait. There's no way it works for this frame piece. Boys, we figured out the secret. You gotta self-tap it together. Oh, it was pulling it in and I stripped it out. Boom, that gap's closed. So we can close all of the gaps. So the frame is in the right spot and we can close all of the gaps with these self-tappers. Like, this is flexible. This flexes out, the self-gapper closes it, and then we would weld around it, take this off, close the hole. So that's great. We have this top section figured out. Here, all the way around. Like the floor is touching everywhere. The inside piece is good, it's touching. Everywhere is touching except for this piece here. The self-tappers draws it close together. We're sending it. I can weld it together with the self-tappers. Now, please don't think that this is some ghetto rig. I mean, okay, I'm pulling it with a 4-wheeler and 2x4s. I guess it is kind of ghetto, but the frame measures out. It is where it should be. People use self-tappers for uni-sides and frames all the time. It's common. It's doing double duty. It's closing the gap so I can weld it, and it's holding it in place so I know it's right. So that's final. I can't pull the firewall out anymore with the tools that I have, but self-tappers did a better job drawing the gap closed than the come along. So I'm happy with that. Tomorrow's prep day. We weld the holes that I caused. You know, being the first time I pulled the frame off, it used an air hammer. Don't use an air hammer, bad idea. We weld all my holes closed, prep all the areas for welding. I have a hole punch. I'm gonna hole punch every inch, an inch center to center, all the way around, everywhere we have to plug weld this frame on. We put it on, self-tap it back into place, weld it together. God, that's gonna be an achievement. Okay, it is indeed the next day. It's just 2:30 in the morning. I'm on 4 hours of sleep. I was too excited to sleep. I want to work on the car. So here we are. It's time to pull this off, and we have to fill every hole. Every one of these holes that I made taking this frame off. This was my first time ever taking off frame, and it shows. So every hole we will fill. The other side I clearly got better. And then of course, I already bragged about this, but on the uni side, 0 holes. Good to go. Time lapse time. All right, checking back in, it is 4 o'clock. I got started around 3, so it took me an hour to get the holes filled on 70% of it. I actually ran out of MIG wire, still have gas, just ran out of welding wire. The store that opens up soonest is at 8 a.m., so I have 4 hours to kill until I can buy more wire to finish welding the holes, but let me show you what I got so far. So passenger side firewall and the driver side firewall welded up and ready for sanding smooth. I got the driver's side floor welded up, ready to go, but you can see the bad side. This is the worst of it here. I ran out of wire. You can see I was starting at the top there, but we got the biggest gash here to fill. But for now, since I'm out of welding wire and I can't continue welding, we're gonna sand what I have welded smooth. Okay, there's the concept. Filled the holes, sand them smooth. No more holes in the firewall. But again, one of those things where you saw me fill the hole, you saw me sand it smooth. I need to rinse and repeat that for the whole chassis, fill all of my holes that I created, sand them all smooth, fill all the pinholes that show up once I sand them smooth, rinse and repeat till they're all full and I'm happy. That's gonna take me a while. And I'm not gonna make you watch it. So I'll be back when all of the holes are filled. Looking at myself in the camera, I am filthy. I'm out of welding gas. I've been at this a long time today. So let me show you where we are. 99% of the welds on the firewall and floor are filled. Again, I need to do a final sand. I ran out of gas, but you can see no holes on the firewall. The firewall is good to go. Again, still not done sanding, but the last hole I needed to fill right there. I did an insane amount of welding and grinding today. I mean, look at the floor. That is all metal shavings and dust. So I think next time I see you, fill one last hole, one last round of sanding everything smooth, weld through primer, punch all my holes in the frame, test fit, self-tappers, welded on. Oh boy, we're getting there. All right, been a couple days. I took Tuesday off work to get this frame on. We are so close, I can taste it. All of the holes are filled on the firewall, on the floor. Now, I say all of the holes are filled, but there's one thing I want to show you. When you're filling holes in thin sheet metal like this, you'll notice like this looks like there's no holes except for the big ones that are supposed to be there. It's not perfectly smooth. That's okay. We're gonna primer over it. We're gonna weld a frame here. We're gonna seam seal it. You will not see any of this. It's perfectly strong. It's smooth enough that we can weld to. It's thick enough we can weld to. But this looks like it's completely sealed. But let me turn off the lights and show you. Okay, so we are in the pitch black. If we look up, the only light in this shop is coming from inside the car. The reason being is even though this looks completely sealed, you don't see any light through it, right? So the reason why we have the lights off and the light and one light on inside the car is we need to check for holes that you can't really see unless, you know, there's something really pointing it out. And we can do all sorts of different angles here, and it looks good. We come up here, no light passing through, you know, except for the big holes. Except for if we come right to this angle, and it exposes a little pinhole, little gash right here. So even though this looks completely filled, turn off the lights, use a light on the inside to check for pinholes. Now I'm gonna fill, I've done this 10 times. When you're working with thin sheet metal like this, you fill the hole, you sand it smooth, more holes come back, and you're chasing your tail. So I'm gonna fill this last pinhole little gash here, and then we're ready. Weld through primer this so we can get the frame on. Now this place is absolutely filthily, disgustingly covered in metal shavings, including exactly where I need to paint. So in order for me to get ready to paint, I have to do a thorough cleaning on both the ground, the car, the air, everything. That way it doesn't get on the paint when I paint it. So I'm gonna do that snapping finger thing. So with a snap of my fingers, we're ready to paint. Okay, here we have it. Firewall is weld-through primered. Super excited. It's not showroom finish quality. Look, if I get close, there's lots of pits. They're not through holes, no light comes through them. They're perfectly sealed. This whole section here is going to be covered by frame. That's why I don't care too much about how it looks underneath. So with all of our holes filled and weld-through primer applied, it's time to test fit again. Self-tap the frame into place exactly where it should be. I honestly bet, just like this, self-tappers alone, I could just drive this car, you know? I bet it'll hold it. That'd be an interesting YouTube video, but I cannot afford that. That took way longer than I thought it was gonna take just to put some self-tappers in. That frame's hard. I went through a lot of drill bits. That was expensive. Literally $50 in drill bits just for me to temporarily self-tap the frame on. But it was well worth it. We are in place, touching absolutely everywhere. Oh, you know what? I missed one right there. Guys, don't worry. I saved the last self-tapper to do it with you. Boom. Now we're done. Now with our frame firmly self-tapped in place, the next step, undo all of it and hole punch, my guess 150 holes, put it back on, self-tack back in place, and then I can finally mark all of the holes, take it off again, sand this. Okay, get this guys, you're gonna love this. We have to sand the weld-through primer off. You can weld through it, just doesn't look good. But for now, the next step, take it off, punch our holes. Okay, here we are. Hole puncher in hand, 8 millimeters. Pretty standard from what I read is 8 millimeter plug welds. If you are spot welding with an actual spot weld machine, you can use panel bond. If you are plug welding, where you punch a hole and then use a normal MIG welder to fill that hole, you cannot use panel bond within Some people say an inch, some people say 2. Now BMWs, remember this is a BMW chassis, even though it's a Toyota. BMWs repair instructions say if you are plug welding, don't use panel bond and space out your plug welds center to center 25 millimeters. That means from here to here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So in this little distance, we already have 10 hole punches, 10 plug welds. Already immediately realizing that when I said 150, we're gonna have 30 here, 40 here. I'm gonna double that number and say we have 150 each side. 300 hole punches, 300 plug welds each side. I'm gonna put up a little counter for you on how many holes I punch and time lapse it because I'm probably gonna be doing that for an hour. Ready, go. Bad news. No, come on, please. Oh no. It's not strong enough to punch through it. Okay, I looked up the operating range of PSI and it said 90 to 120. And if I turn it up to 120, it does punch a hole at least here. So let's try here now. Yeah, even at 120 PSI, it still does not go through this through the thick stuff here. So that's really unfortunate. Well, I'm gonna punch as many holes as I can with this. Keeping the count's gonna be a lot harder. I'm gonna have to drill all these out with a spot weld drill bit now. That's gonna be awful. All right, well, let's just do what we can with this. Well, it looks like I went through everything I could. All of this hard stuff on the bottom, just too hard. All right, well, at least I could punch half of it. I'm sure it saved me some time. I don't even know if you would consider this half. I guess we'll know when we're done with the count. I bought 12 5/16 drill bits, which is 7.97 millimeters. So basically the same size that I've been hole punching. All of the holes are either punched, drilled through, or marked. Let's quick count how many holes I either drilled or punched or self-tapped. That way we know how many welds I'm gonna be plugging. $175 plug welds on this side. That side's gonna be pretty much the same. They are a little different, they curve in different spots, but 175 times 2, that's like 350. Anyway, you get the point. A lot of holes drilled, punched, welded. Next time you see me, I'll be done hole punching and hole drilling, and we'll move on to the next step. Holy moly, 400 holes drilled, 350 on the frame, 50 on the car. 8 hours, 8 hours of my life. 2 hours a night for 4 nights. Awful, awful, awful. I went through so many bits. That was expensive. I think I spent $200 on drill bits because I bought Milwaukee cobalt tipped and titanium drill bits. They're expensive and they didn't even work for more than one hole usually. Enough complaining, I'm sorry. 8 hours of my life drilling holes, I'm kind of salty. But here we go. 2 frame rails, I guess they're called wheelhouses. 2 wheelhouses drilled, ready for assembly, and so is the car. Now I'm gonna change the plan on you guys. I gotta keep you on your toes. So 5 seconds ago for you, like 4 days ago for me, I told you, you can't really weld through primer. Obviously you can, it just doesn't work as good as welding to bare metal. I don't think that's fair for me to say for this primer. I've never used it. I've never personally welded through primer before, so I'm going to try it. I'm gonna put the frame on, screw it into place, and I'm gonna try one of the spots underneath where it'll be covered by seam sealer, nobody will see it. I'm gonna try welding through the weld through primer, and if it works just fine, I'm not gonna spend an hour to 2 hours sanding off 400 spots of weld through primer. Okay, we are bolted on. One thing, weld through primer works just fine. It welded just fine. I don't know why people on the internet say weld through primer doesn't work. Try a different brand. The brand I'm using, got it on Amazon, worked just fine. So I don't have to sand out 400 areas that I'm gonna weld to, but I do have like 50. I suppose I didn't try it, but the black stuff on this frame, that's called E-coat, and I don't think I can weld through that. So frame off, sand off the E-coat. It's time. If I was a good storyteller and a good editor, this would be the climax of the video, because all of the pre-weld stuff on is done. We straightened and filled all the holes in the existing chassis, weld through primer, test fit, measure it out, self-tapper screws so that we know it's in the right spot and it's sucked together tight, drilled 400 holes in the existing chassis and the new chassis combined. You're gonna watch me slide this existing frame on for the last time. I've done it, I don't know how many times in this video and how many times before, but unless I forgot something or something drastically goes wrong, this is gonna be the last time. Okay, all the screws in. Does it measure out still? 1017, 1141, 1283, 685. We are all within spec on all of those measurements. We still are too close together, but it'll be very easy for me to push them apart once these are welded on, rather than me trying to pull the firewall out with nothing to really grab onto. Now, I have about 375 plug welds to do. The only reason why we're not doing all 400 is because this section here is the uni side. Well, I guess this is about 10. 390 plug welds to do. These 10 I won't be doing because we'll do them when we put the uni side on. Okay, now don't be mad, but I already welded the entire bottom frame rails, and that was about half the work. Now, if you're new to the channel, I don't really like filming under cars because I barely fit under them and I don't have a lift, I'm just on jack stands. So I didn't count, but I'd say definitely half of the plug welds are already done underneath the car on the frame rail. I will say on the bottom, I both plugged and like stitch seamed weld. It's way overkill, but I want it to be strong. I want zero doubt in my mind that these two pieces of metal, well, these three pieces of metal are fused into one. Now I am by no means a good welder, but here's what I mean. So I both filled the plug welds, like 1, 2, 3, and then I also stitched weld or seam weld. Literally the whole way, I both plugged and seamed weld. Now don't look too close, because I suck at welding. Also, I didn't prep very well. Sometimes there was seam sealer in the way, and instead of sanding it off, I just kind of burned it off with the weld. But 100% sure, bottom attached. So now you get to watch the whole point of the video, me welding the frame back on. Holy moly, it's welded on. Started this video not sure that I could get this done. The firewall was absolutely terrifying. And here we are. This thing is welded. I would say that this is stronger than stock just because instead of panel bond, we got double the amount of plug welds. And on top of that, I wanted to be extra sure, and I seam welded on top of the plug, well, not on top of the plug welds, but on top of plug welding, I seam welded. My welds are not pretty. I can do nice welds, but it's very hard to get nice welds on this weld-through primer. If you want nice welds, sand off the weld-through primer. If you don't care, you can weld through it. But all the way around the top, down and in, down the frame rail, other side, frame rail, all the way around, down below. Again, don't zoom in. The welds are not pretty, but I promise you they are strong. I promise you they will hold. This is a pretty nice look from the inside. You can see how much weld is holding this on. Our firewall, you can see the pattern on both sides, and then the frame rail all the way down, and that box area that comes out there as well. When I started this video, I did not honestly think we were gonna be able to pull this firewall. I had to try, I did try, and we actually couldn't even pull the firewall with no frame pulling tools. But we were able to get the frame sucked in with self-tapper screws. Did not think that was gonna work. I'm pretty sure I said, well, let's try this for fun. Self-tapper sucked it right up. I could not believe my eyes. I have never done frame repair, and it shows. This was my first time, a lot of mistakes, but mistakes are correctable, and that is the most important thing for you to know. When you start working on cars, I've never done this. This is crazy. I have no clue why I decided this was a good idea, but you have to try. If you stay in your comfort zone, you'll never learn, you'll never expand, you'll never better yourself. This has been one of the most satisfying, biggest projects I've ever done, because who else can say they've done this? More importantly, I am so glad you guys were along for the ride. Next video, transmission tunnel repair, uni-side on. I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all the things that helps me more than you know, and I'll see you in the next one.